Good evening and welcome to your Four Lads Sunday show. Scott is away washing his hair. Cheryl's still gallivanting all over the place, and Dougie is at a family birthday party, so it's just me and Mark tonight. But before we say hello to him, I need to give a quick mention to all the sponsors that support us here at Four Lads. Rhino Express, Clydeview Fire Protection and Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions, CSD Air Conditioning, Candid and RYDC, as well as our partners over at Black Rooster and Art of Gold. We really appreciate the support over the course of the season, so please go and check all of them out. Now, as ever, joining me on the Sunday show this week is Mr. Mark Morrison. How the devil are you after what was a rather uneventful game today, Mark?
I'm better now. If you'd asked me at 12:30, I wouldn't be as joyous as what I am now. But I feel like I've been away for a while. I know it's only been a couple of weeks, but I was on with Stevie and Kenny a couple of weeks ago. But I feel like I've been away for a while, so it's good to be back and getting involved in the pod again.
Surprised that Stevie and Kenny let you on, given how much hair that you've got. Usually they only like to keep it to the baldies, so you should be lucky from that point of view, mate.
I was actually going to go for a haircut today, to be fair. And to be fair, watching Rangers, I think I'm not going to have that much left over the course of the next few weeks, given that first half. I'm going to have no hair, to be fair.
And before we even come on air, we've got somebody saying what a fantastic podcast it is, so really appreciate that. There is no need for the donations and stuff like that, but it's always appreciated, and we hope that you do enjoy the show. Mark, I think last time we were on was just after the Aberdeen game. We spoke about the need to be able to continue the momentum against Dundee United and what was going to be the last 6 games of the season at that point. We've put Dundee United away fairly easy, scoring 4 goals in that game, which meant the last 8 goals that we'd scored were by different players. I think we'll talk about this in a wee bit, but it's a really, really good position to be in, actually, from a Rangers point of view, where we've got a number of players that are beginning to contribute at this late stage of the season, because they're all going to need to do that in the final 5 games.
Yeah, I think if we look back to where we were first quarter of the season, we didn't really have that, did we? We were solely relying on Chermiti and Miovski, and clearly at that point they weren't delivering. And I think to win a title, if we're being honest, we need all players to step up and play their part. And I think it's to that point there, the 8 goals over 2 games, absolutely brilliant to see. It's different goal scorers. I think for me as well, it's the different types of goals we've been scoring. I mean, we've had that variation, which before we were, if we're looking at the start of 2026, it was mainly set pieces we were scoring goals from. At open play, we kind of had a bit of a struggle there, but as I said, over the last couple of games, it's been fairly positive in terms of goals scored and who's actually been contributing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting once we get the set pieces back on track. Maybe we'll be looking at scoring 12 goals a game instead of just the 6 that we did today. But while all of that is positive, I think the one thing that we highlighted from that Aberdeen game is we are a little bit guilty, and if we could kind of cut out the mind blanks that we're having in some situations in these games, it would certainly make life a little bit easier, because obviously we conceded 3 today, we conceded 2 against Dundee United, and the majority of these goals are actually from our own play. And it certainly would do my nerves a little bit better if we could get out of the habit of conceding some of these slack goals that we've been doing as well.
Yeah, it's just cutting out silly mistakes, isn't it? And I think, to be fair, we're also going a bit more detail when we're going through the Falkirk game itself. But I think Dundee United, we probably take into consideration what Max Aarons did in the second half. There's a breakaway, takes a book in. Chukwueze, for example, in the Dundee United game, obviously lets the player go on, and Dundee United get their first goal, and then the second one, poor play through our own doing. And I think that's the frustrating part, isn't it? Where we were pretty comfortable in that game, and then from then gets a little bit nervy, doesn't it? And Ibrox was a little bit edgy until we also got the third and the fourth from there. But I think all in all, going into these final 5, I think that is the importance here. Is also, if we can keep clean sheets, great. But if not, just cutting out silly mistakes and actually making teams work for their goals.
Yeah, and I think it's if we can get that balance right going into the last 5 games, somebody just said it there. We are the form team in the league, which is great, and it's another step closer. I guess it brings us on to the news that came out earlier this week about the post split fixtures. Don't really want to go into too much detail, mate, but what was your thoughts on the way that the fixtures have come out from the random computer? We'll just touch on it briefly.
Well, the supercomputer, look, we're going to have to play Hearts and Celtic away. I think that is what it is. In terms of the timings of some of these games, could be put into question. But look, it is what it is. And for me, we're going to have to play these games no matter what. But I think there's obviously some conspiracies out there, and rightly so. But from my perspective, look, we have to play these games, and I think if we do what we need to do, then nothing else matters really. But look, we've got Motherwell and Hibs at home. I'd actually be quite nervous going away to Motherwell, just given how we've been against them, and Hibs is never an easy tie as well. Obviously, Falkirk, that'll be 3 times we played them away on the plastic pitch. Probably some questions around that, but we've obviously got to play 19 games at home, so that is what it is. And fair play to Falkirk, they've been a decent side this season, where I think you've seen some evidence today where they're a decent footballing side, and that won't be an easy game in the last one, but 5 cup finals left. Let's see where it takes us.
Guys, absolutely, and we'll go into obviously the main game that we'll talk about today, which is Falkirk. Obviously, from the pre-match presser, I think the manager indicated there was a number of injury concerns around the squad heading into the game. It was confirmed that Nadiri is going to be out for what sounds like the rest of the season. I don't know if we'll see him again, unfortunately. And Romans, who I think we're a bit more hopeful that we'll have back for some of the games in the split, but that there was also doubts about Moore and Skov Olsen. Now, when the starting lineup came out, I was really pleased to see Mikey Moore in there. And it meant that we'd kind of started with Butland, Tav, Big Fernandez and Giga and Magoma as the back 5. Chukwani, Raskin, Asgard, Moore and Gassama, with Chermiti leading the line. Now, it kind of looked like we started with a bit of a change in shape and Chermiti just leading the line. But I guess from the players that we had kind of available and fit, it's probably the strongest lineup that the manager could have picked, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I was surprised Moore was starting just given that pitch, and to your point there in terms of role referencing in the press conference, obviously there was slight concern there, given what we've got coming up. A bit of risk to play him, and he's only lasted 45, and probably makes sense given what we've got coming up. I think some of his play, you could probably see he wasn't fully fit today. There were some moments he had in the ball, he got us up the park, but he just didn't seem as free-flowing as what he has been in prior weeks, so I think that definitely played a part. In terms of overall lineup, I think it's clear now, though, we're given what we've seen in the second half, that we need to play 2 up top. I think it's, for me, that Chermiti being on his own clearly just doesn't work. He done very, very well second half. First half, he just looked a bit all over the place, and he didn't have a lot to work with, in all fairness, and that's maybe part of the way Asgard was playing off him, and how we were generally on the ball. But I think it's clear that we need to stick with the 2. And also to a point, when you mentioned Rule's press conference, I thought it was interesting where he was asked about Miovski and he flipped it to Asgard pretty quickly. I think there was evidence there that Miovski was never going to start today. But my word, given what he'd done in the second half, he's definitely stated he's given himself a chance to be in the starting lineup. But over the piece with the starting 11, I think you're right. Sterling obviously not in the squad, given the pitch. I think it's fair. Tav, coming in, should be pretty solid, but I think first half in particular, his distribution was pretty poor. But all in all, I think with the other options we had, I think it's pretty much a fair shout with what he's gone with, other than I would have played the 2 instead of the Chermiti on his own, because I think he struggles when he does.
Yeah, and timing of this game was interesting. Obviously, Hearts and Celtic both playing yesterday, picking up wins. It meant that we didn't really have any room for error, so it was going to be a massive, massive test for the team to come through today. But we knew that Falkirk would have been riding on a wave of positivity because they'd secured their top 6 position, which is a fantastic result for John McGlynn and the team there. And they've actually got their eyes on trying to catch Hibs in 5th place now. But I guess with all that said, Mark, it was really important that we approached this game in the right manner for the off. We needed to be on the front foot aggressive, and showed that we kind of realised that we're in a title fight. Take the game to Falkirk, and it didn't really start that way, did it? It was the complete opposite, and there was only really one-way traffic for the first kind of 25 minutes, and the first real attack that Falkirk had, it ended up in a goal. Chitwani and Jiga don't exactly cover themselves in glory. The ball gets put out into the flank. It's played across. It looked like a fairly tame cross ball, to be honest. I thought Magoma was going to clear it, but he kind of makes a mess of his feet, doesn't get anywhere near the ball, and it's the simplest of tap-ins. And just the start that we wanted going into this game.
Yeah, I think for me, Falkirk played to the conditions well. I think the difference between them and us in that first half, they were up for the fight right from the off. They played to the conditions very well, played to the pitch. Obviously, I know they train on it, etc. So they all have that advantage. But for me, my concern was they just were putting the balls in the channels, putting them behind, and we just struggled to deal with it. In all fairness, and you could tell with the way the pitch was, it was holding up pretty well. And that first goal, as you said, just put him behind, and we just don't deal with it. And from there, boys also put over. Makoma, safe to say, has had an absolute shocker there, where he's falling over his feet, and the boys, taking a touch, got all the time in the world, and he places it away. But from that off, I think that was the concerning part, was we were just too tippy-tappy and just not playing the conditions, and Falkirk were quite happy for us to just sort of have it there. And then as soon as it went to the middle to the final third, the amount of passes we had getting blocked off. And for me, it was not even that. I think it was just more that the battle itself, we just did not look up for it whatsoever. And to your point there, we're in a title fight, first and foremost, win our battles. I'll say that every time. These sort of places, if you go back to the Walter Smith era, etc., this was what it's all about. Win your battle first, and then the quality will take it from there. But we just didn't look up for it from the get-go. And for me, it was sort of our game plan from the off just wasn't there, and all over the place. And boys up spot on there, sleeping for the first 40 minutes. We were all over the place.
And this is the type of game where goals change games. We've got a massive chance with Trinity. And ultimately we could probably do a show entitled "The Good, the Bad, and the Use of Trinity." In itself, and it would be a good chat. But it's from a free kick. It's a little dink from Asgard, and it's a great ball in. Now VAR might have brought it back, and he might have been offside, but for him not even hit the target, this is I think what frustrates most Rangers fans with Mark, isn't it? That we go 1-0 down, we get a chance like that, and you really want your striker to just stick that in the back of the net, because it potentially changes the complexion of the game. And it could have been so much worse, as we'll touch on. But he's got to be busting the net with that chance, regardless of whether he's offside or not.
Oh, absolutely. I think for me, it's it changes the swing of the game, the momentum there, and obviously we'll come on a bit later in terms of Chitwani's goal. But the whole at that point, I thought we were under a bit of pressure, and generally our use of the ball was pretty poor. But it's a good ball from Asgard, and like you said, he's maybe 8-10 yards out. And just that composure in front of goal. I don't know if it was Boyd brought up afterwards, but just when he's got that time to think, he just seems to be, I don't know what it is. Whereas if he doesn't have to think, he can, create these worldies, and before you know it, he scores absolutely incredible goals. But just the technique's just all wrong, isn't it? And it's laid on a plate for him. And you're right. Obviously, probably would have been given offside, but it's just in that belief it gives throughout the team that we can do this. But just composure's all wrong from when it comes to him.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, we don't want to be too negative. I think we've still got to highlight some of the weaknesses, because they ultimately did redeem himself later on in the game, as we'll talk about. But in those early stages, 26 minutes, it then becomes an absolute disaster for us, because we've never got a foothold in this game in that first 25-30 minutes. And there's a few folk in the comments saying that the conditions had a massive impact on it, and I know Stevie and Amrit mentioned that in the car pod, and Stevie mentioned it just before we came on air, that the wind was probably a lot worse than a lot of us appreciated watching on TV, and the fact that we were shooting in, we had the sun on our faces as well, made it really difficult for the likes of Fernandez and Jigger to be able to judge the ball. But it's another goal that comes for nothing from a Rangers point of view when we're conceding. It's a bit of a deflected pass, and the boy Yeats. It's an absolutely cracking finish to put it past Butland, but the fact that we've just missed a chance and then Falkirk go 2-0 up, I know what I was thinking, and it was, we have absolutely blown this title race and we've got no hope of this now. And I think in the chat there was probably a few comments like that as well, but it just demonstrates why we need to be clinical. And when those types of chances come up, we've got to make sure that we stick the ball in the back of the net, because we're staring 2-0 down after 26, 27 minutes, and we're thinking, that's it, done.
Yeah, and all fairness to the second goal, I think there's a couple of moments where the ball just needs to be built up at the park. We didn't need to be cute, clever with it. It's ricocheting all over the place. And then, to be fair, the finish itself is quite a tidy finish. Butland has no chance. But again, it was just how we were. And it's maybe a fair point in terms of how the conditions were. But I think, from my perspective, then I think, we've got to get them turning, or try to. I just felt we were too tippy-tappy throughout and putting ourselves under unnecessary pressure. And if that's the way the game is in terms of the wins obviously against us, etc. But, these guys are professional footballers where they can still ping the ball 50, 60 yards with the wind against them. But the goal itself, I just felt, there was a comedy of errors throughout where we just never got a grip of the ball. But I can't take away the finish itself. It was a tidy finish. But again, our own doing there where could have been prevented.
I was just laughing at that comment. I certainly think I would echo that can we not just have a simple 2-0 win? Because this doesn't do anything to your nervous system when you're watching this type of football. To hold out any hope of the game, we needed to get on the score sheet before half time, and we did. In what was probably comical circumstances. Asgard hits the post, the ball breaks out to Raskin, who lofts it over, and I think it was Gassama that actually got his head on it. He hits the post, it breaks to Chukwani, and he sticks it in the back of the net, which is great. I don't know how many Falkirk players were standing about with their hands up and looking for a free kick, a kind of goal kick, because they thought the ball had gone out. But it's the age-old adage of play to the whistle, and it was good to see that we kept going and managed to get that one in the back of the net just before half time, because if we didn't, then second half is a bit of a different task at that point.
I think it changes the complexion of the game, if I'm honest. I think it gets our tails up. We're going to half time. That team talk's completely different to if we were 2-0 down. And you can see that from the start of the second half, the momentum was with us. But the goal itself, Asgard's actually unlucky with his chance. And I think the thing for me was we never stopped. Raskin's put the ball back in. I said Gassama, we kept it alive throughout. And then Chukwani's with a decent finish into the roof of the net. It'd been easy for us to just stop as well, thinking it's going out of play. But we had our own unofficial linesman in the stand, Mr. Clifford, and Amrit said it was still in place, so I'm going to take their word for it. And to be fair, when you look at it, I know the angles weren't great and stuff, but linesman's got a clear view of it. He's literally on the corner flag looking at it there and then. And to your point there, where that's on Falkirk for stop playing. It's an old football saying, but play to the whistle, and absolutely right. But for me, it was just, that swing where we needed that given. We hadn't been great up to that point throughout, but all of a sudden, get that goal, tails are up, half time comes, and then we can regroup, and then from there, you can see where it takes us.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, John McGlynn highlighted that. He was fully aware that Falkirk don't have the cameras to be able to kind of give a clear indication as to whether that ball had gone out, but he fully put the blame on his players that they shouldn't have stopped. Ultimately for us, it doesn't really matter, because the only thing that we care about is getting back into that game, and it probably came just at the right time. And again, you mentioned Asgard being quite unlucky, and we'll probably highlight him a wee bit now because he's a player that's come in for a fair bit of criticism. But actually, as we'll talk about in a wee bit, fringe players need to add, and it's another assist that he's come up with again today, as we'll talk about. But he's starting to get his head screwed on a wee bit, I think, and beginning to contribute a wee more. And it's good to see him doing a lot of his work now further up the pitch. Because I think it's one of the things that we've always been pretty critical of him, that he was coming too deep. And I think at least having the likes of Chukwani and Raskin there knows that he's got the protection, which means it can free him up to be a bit more of a threat, hopefully, in the final third. And if he can, start to get a few more assists and maybe even get on the score sheet a little bit more often, then he's going to be a pretty important player in the running.
Yeah, it's good to see the Alsatian having some involvements in the game today. But I think for me, he is better up in that final third, having a bit. He is an impact player, and to your point, earlier in the season where he's sitting on the halfway line, and he's got a tidy touch in that about him, but he needs to influence games, and he had that impact second half. First half, he had his ball in for Chimiti, to be fair. He's obviously at the post, but needs to see more of that, especially these 5 games. He's going to be absolutely critical if he's going to be starting in that final third, having that impact. As you said, a couple of good assists, but he's on a little bit of a run now. I don't think it was all round perfect, but you can definitely see moments in his game there where he's definitely had a positive impact and can definitely influence the game, and that's obviously why he was brought in. I think the frustrating thing, as you referenced, where sometimes he's got touches in the middle of the park, he's not doing anything, he's not having that influence in the game. But it was good to see that. Obviously, for the first goal itself, he was, as I said, he was unlucky with actually hitting the post, but all in all, he did have some moments where he also contributed to the team, and also good to see.
Yeah, and it's almost like Cubster has been reading the agenda that we've got, because literally just about to talk about the fact that, I think most of us felt we needed to change things at half time, and the manager did. So he brings on Miovski for Mikey Moore. Whether that was pre-planned or not, we won't know, but obviously Moore potentially carrying that knock and needing to protect him a wee bit. But, that meant we probably went back to the staunch Stoner mark and with the 2 up top. I think that was a change that was probably needed, because we were not asking anywhere near enough questions of the Falkirk kind of midfield and defence in that first half. So it was good to see a positive change like that, at least from the manager, and a tweak in formation to be able to kind of combat what Falkirk were doing in that first half.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it wasn't done earlier in the first half, given what we're seeing. You could easily change it after 30 minutes. But I think you're right there, where Miovski throughout that second half had a major impact, and he's had a bit of criticism as well. And in all fairness, the last few weeks he's had a number of goals, and he's been involved in goals as well. So fair play to him on that front. But as we mentioned earlier, in terms of Moore, just wasn't there. But I think that Niggles obviously had a bit of an impact, and it was the right call. And also Gassam on the left, you can see how influential he can be when he plays on the left hand side. I don't know what it is when he's on the right. Just doesn't seem to work, does it? And even that first half, I know he was also involved in the goal, but generally his overall play, he didn't have much an impact in the first half in particular. But you could just see the switch when he's moved over that left hand side, and how dynamic, how even that impetus, he was right there from the off, wasn't he? And just driven to get forward. But I don't know why, but for some reason when he goes on the left, he's just a completely different player.
Yeah, and it's from that that we get. We get right back into it. Literally, 2 minutes after half time, Gassama's on the left hand side. Initially loses it, but works really, really hard to get it back, which was great to see. Doesn't give the foul away, because at first I thought the referee was going to blow for that, but he just sticks it in a plate for the big man Chimiti to level things up. And actually, when you see that back, it was a really, really neat finish from him, just to lift it slightly. And 2 each and game on at that point.
Yeah, and I think that was the difference from the first to the second half. That determination fight that Gassam had to get that ball back. We didn't really have that in the first half, in all fairness. And he's earned that. He's worked hard. He's got the ball back, never gave up. He's putting a decent ball in for Chimiti. I think to your point there, it's how he's lifted that. He's opened his foot up, hasn't he? He's opened his body up, lifted his right foot, and I think Boyd said afterwards, if he hits it into the ground, goalie saves it. He's probably right, but tidy finish, and then from there, there was no looking back.
Yeah, and doesn't take as long to then get Moses in front, which is great. Nico Raskin, who I will say, I felt certainly based on his second half performance was man of the match for me. He picks up the clearance for the Falkirk keeper. Ball makes his way to Asgard. Raskin continues his run. Asgard plays him in, and it's a great finish, low and across the keeper. And I think that now takes it to, is it 5 goals and 7 assists for Nico Raskin this season? And that 45 minutes is kind of what we need to see in these last 5 games, because when he's on that type of form, he is an absolutely cracking player and can have a massive, massive influence in this Rangers team.
It's a brilliant finish, to be fair, isn't it? He's drilled it right across. Keeper has absolutely no chance, but he makes it from, as he said, he's taking an interception from the goalkeeper. And credit Asgard as well. He's the weight of the pass outside of the foot. It's laid on from him, and Raskin's obviously set his cell up, and then from there, keeper absolutely has no chance. But to your point with Raskin, I think Raskin is going to be influential and probably could be the key factor here on us winning this title. I think when Raskin's on his game, we've talked about this. Can he be a 6? Is he an 8? I was listening afterwards what Scotty Arfield was saying in terms of he's a 6.5. But I think he's definitely that player who can, have that impact in terms of scoring goals himself. He's got a tidy finish. He's got a great leap from what we've seen for set pieces. But then, he's even had involvements to set up goals today. And over the last few weeks in particular, the goal involvements he's had. And I think, given the games we've got coming up, I think he could probably be the one that's most critical for us to bring home this title.
Yeah, and it was interesting listening to the manager after the game as well, talking about how important Nico is to him. He was talking about when he's making tactical instructions, etc. It goes through Nico when he's on the pitch as well, which I thought was really interesting. But there's no doubt about it that Nico in that type of form, and if he can keep it up for the next 5 games, is going to be really influential. And there's a point that Stevie made as well, that it almost looked like him and Chuck Wani ended up playing, Chuck Wani as the 6 and Nico as the 8 in that second half. And if that's the type of freedom that you can get with Chuck Wani sitting behind him, and then Barron coming in and playing that 6 later on in the game, that'll be useful in the running as well, because we want our best players in the final third impacting games, rather than being in the defensive third where his talents maybe aren't as well suited. And I've not been a big fan of him dropping as deep to the centre halves to get the ball. I want him to be kind of much further up and influencing the game. So hopefully that will be a sign of things to come from Mr. Raskin. Certainly makes Stevie happy if it does.
I think it's quite interesting that you just said that with Chuck Wani. And also, I'm guessing that's given the conditions in the wind, where we didn't really need that as much protection as we did obviously in the first half. But I think you're right there, when he is getting the ball off the centre halves and also trying to make the play and dictate the tempo, that's all fine and well. But I think a player in Nico Raskin's quality, he has to be further up the pitch. And I think you can see on the evidence of today and what we've seen over the last few weeks, it's pretty clear that, if he's in and around that area, he will have an impact. And it's all fine and well trying to start games or start the play from the centre backs, but for me, I think he's further up the pitch, and he probably to a Barry Ferguson comparison, I wouldn't go there, but I don't know what he's meaning there in terms of he is at 8, and he can definitely have moments where ball falls to him. You know what I mean? I'd be fairly confident he'd be hitting the target.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess next up, it's great, extending lead even further. Bojan gets the first of his braces today, and it's actually Nico who turns provider this time. Fantastic ball in to Miovski, who ends up on the blind side of the Falkirk defender with his run. Adjusts really, really well. I think finishing with his knee. I've seen Kerrydale meltdown retweeting somebody that said it was a blatant handball, etc. For him when he slapped that in the back of the net, which was great to see. There's obviously a little bit of pain across the other side of the city tonight. But at that point, we're 4-2 up, and we're thinking job done, because from the moment Chuck Wani scored, there is no doubt about it, we absolutely destroyed Falkirk today. As much as that first 30, 40 minutes was really, really disappointing, the reaction and the performance was brilliant. And there was only ever one team that was going to win that, despite a little bit of nerves that crept in this second half. But we adjusted to the conditions. We played to our strengths a hell of a lot better, and it was a really good response to that, going 2-0 down, I felt.
Yeah, and I think, in all fairness, there's been a lot of questions on the team's mentality for a long time now, and rightly so, given some of the performances, etc. And even that first 40 minutes, I think you're right. But don't take away credit from the team. It'd be easy for us to sulk and just and take it. But in all fairness, once we got that goal back, there was no stopping us. And in terms of that fourth goal itself, Raskin involved again, gets out his feet, pings in a great ball. But Miovski as well, his movement, he's beside the centre half, and then he peels off blind side, and he thighs it into the net. It's a tidy finish, to be fair. But his movement on that, just given he sort of defender could see him side on, and then he just cut behind him on his blind side. Defender has absolutely no chance, and from there he tidies it well. But I think for me that what, maybe 11, 12 minutes was it from the first goal? I think it was about 47 and then 59, 60. Just absolutely blessed them, didn't we?
We did, and it was great because it did give us a little bit of breathing space until, of course, we make it difficult for ourselves again, because it wouldn't be a Rangers game without us taking a shotgun and potentially blowing off our own feet. And it was in the form of Tav this time. I think fairly unanimous that he was a bit all at sea. He doesn't get himself into the right position. I think he turns the wrong way and ends up dragging the Falkirk player down to give away a penalty, which is then duly converted. And it was the one thing that we didn't really want to do, was give Falkirk any glimmer of hope, given the start to the game that they'd had. And probably made us a little bit more nervous than we needed to be for a kind of period of 4 or 5 minutes. But clear penalty. There's nothing that we can do about that. It seemed to be a bit of a brain fart, really, from the captain on this occasion, didn't it?
Yeah, I think there's no complaints in terms of it being a penalty. There's actually two mistakes he makes. One, he gets dragged to the ball, he gets done with a 1-2, and instead of going to the player, I think for me, he should run in a straight line to try and block that. He's not got the pace to get there, and then whatever he's doing in terms of tugging him back, there's no complaints from our side. But then you start to think, is the momentum going to shift from how well we've done for that first 25 minutes or so of the second half? And to be fair, even after a couple of minutes after, I think Falkirk had a chance to put wide, which is just unnecessary given how well we'd played so up to that point in the second half. But for me, Tav, he just gets caught on the wrong side, and then from there, I think he just needs to run a straight line instead of going directly to the man, pulls him back. And even at that, even if he is going in the direction of the player's going away from goal. It's not like he's going directly into goal, so no idea what his thinking is, but it is what it is. But at least at the end, we weren't punished on it.
Yeah, no, we weren't. And we kind of round it off. Both strikers today getting braces. I think the first one is Gassama having another bit of an impact in the game. The ball from him is deflected into Chamiti's path, and actually cracking finish. Hits it low along the deck with power. Gives Bain no chance. There was no way he was getting near that. And it's kind of pick it out the net. And then Chamiti's involved again for Miovski's second. A nice little ball down the line from Ant-Man. Cracking movement again from Miovski. Just demonstrates what a kind of penalty box kind of poacher striker he can be. And a lovely ball across from Ant-Man, coming off the bench and getting an assist for a simple tap-in. Takes the score to 6-3. And regardless of the defensive frailties that we've shown, that's 14 goals in 3 games. And a major, major hurdle that we've overcome, especially after the start to that game.
Yeah, I think for me, the fifth goal for Chamiti, Raskin starts it. I thought Raskin was brilliant in the build up to that. He break up play, and he goes by one of the Falkirk's players. I thought he was outstanding with that. Drives, gets us up the pitch, plays out Miovski. Miovski, good ball to Gassama. And again, that impetus for Gassama when he's got it, drives at the defender, really positive. He's unlucky to have the shot blocked, but then that's the difference with Chamiti, where he has to think about it or doesn't. When he doesn't have to think about it, drills into the ground, keeper has absolutely no chance. And then in terms of the sixth goal, the thing I liked about it as well was Ant-Man starting that, passes out wide to, I think it's Chamiti, isn't it? Yeah. But then he carries on that run, doesn't he? It's right to the byline. And I think that's the difference where in that variation of goals, ball getting fires across. and poacher's goal. And that's exactly what we need from Miovski, given chances are going to happen like that over the next 5 games, and we need somebody to be there to put in the net, and great way to finish it, to be fair, in the 6th.
Yeah, it is. And, again, 6 goals is great. It's another +3 in the goal difference column. We can't really be upset and try and pick the performance apart too much. It was good to see Barron come on, get some minutes, Dio come on, get some minutes, because ultimately I think all of these players potentially are going to be needed as part of the running. We've got Motherwell up next. We'll then have 2 tough away games against Hearts and Celtic. And I'm hoping, I'd love us to be able to say we could win that title against Hibs at home, because it'd be a perfect way to top the season off by winning it in front of our own fans. But we then have to come back to Falkirk and play them in the last day of the season, if it's still live at that point. So, 5 more cup finals for this team, and if we can keep going the way we're going at the moment, we can't help but be positive.
No, absolutely. And I think for me, the momentum's with us right now. I think we are the informed team. I think to your point there, where there is 2 tough away games, we're going to have to play them no matter what. Motherwell won't be an easy game. They're a decent side. I think just need to look at the game yesterday against Hearts. I think they're fairly unlucky. And to be fair, they've had a really good season. Some good players, got a bit of threat with pace in the final third. So we also need to watch that, given we've been a bit sloppy at the back, so they might punish us on that. But I'm pretty confident, given to the question there in terms of the team turning up today. We did, and yeah, we didn't start great. We went through it, analysed it, but for me, questions were asked, and I think they've answered them. And positive thing, even when we went 4-2 up to then going back to 4-3, the positive thing for me was, we didn't stop. We kept going, even after that nervy 3-4 minutes afterwards. And then to end the game 6-3 helps build the goal difference up, which I think will potentially could play a part come the end of the season. So it's good that we've obviously built that up over the last few weeks in terms of 14 goals in the last 3 games. But I think that obviously the first one, I'm not getting too carried away in terms of Hibs and lifting titles and stuff like that, but I hope that's the case. However, just see the first one, Motherwell. It will be a tough game, however. I think with the way we've been and what the team's delivering, in particular over the last few weeks, where it hasn't been the easiest. We've stood up and been counted. Which, you look at Rangers over the last 2-3 seasons in particular. How many times have we shot the bed and fell away? Where this team, and I still don't think it's a perfect squad. I think there's still, if you look how we started the season, I think it goes back to that job of what Danny Rule has done. In terms of what we've delivered so far, but it's not done yet.
Absolutely, I think that we've spoken about this before as well, Mark. I think when we looked at the run of fixtures up until the split, I think we'd said previously that we needed to win every game, or at least be as close to Hearts and Celtic as we could at that point. The fact that we're 1 point behind Hearts, who are in first place, we've kind of done that job to begin with, which is really good. I think the thing that's heartening for me is we're now listening to a manager and a group of players who aren't scared to talk about going after the title. Because I think it comes back to some of the things that's been levied at the players before, is this lack of mentality. But at least they are talking about it, and that demonstrates to me that each and every single one of them is focused on it as well. They know what's at stake, and I think many times in the past, manager has been questioned about the mentality of this group of players, and I think he's always answered it in the same style. And today was another big nail in the coffin to some of those questions. Very easily at 2-0 down, we could have folded, especially how badly we played in that first kind of 20, 30 minutes. But we managed to get that goal back before halftime. We regrouped. And then we did come back and we absolutely blew Falkirk out the water. Now, we've not only won that game, we've increased the goal difference. We've gone away to a difficult ground on a plastic pitch and dispatched that team. And, the manager was asked again, I think, in the post-match presser about mentality, but he's quite right to be defending mentality of the squad, because so far they seem to be a very, very different animal under Danny Rule, and whether that is down to him and his influence, or whether it is just because we do have more players in there that are up for the fight a little bit more. But it certainly seems to be a different place at the moment with a lot of these players and with this management group in charge.
I think there'll always be questions about mentality until we start winning things. I think that'll always be the case, and rightly so. I think for me, the difference, there was a moment in the second half, and we brought up in the chat, where I think it's Kasama gets fouled. It's quite a bad one. And you can see Raskin, Fernandez, there's a number of players just collectively going over there to obviously protect our players. And I think that's the difference where, I think if you look at prior squads, player just been on his own, other players been 20, 30, 40 yards away from the action. Whereas you just see that collective group just coming together and, you know what, we'll stick up for our own, we'll protect our own. It was good to see. And I think it was Danny Rose saying in the conference as well, there was chats at half time in terms of, I'd like to have been in that room to see what had been said, but I think it's back to that point. I think I spoke about a podcast a few weeks back. Everyone needs to be held to account, and we've talked about this leadership group, questions around them, and rightly so, because it's been a while since we've obviously won stuff. But I think you can sort of see that togetherness, and when the crunch needs to be happening, we're there, and you can just see everyone's in that fight together. And we're going to need it. We're going to absolutely need it, given a couple of the tough away games that we've got coming up. This group needs to stand up and fight for each other, given it won't be the easiest of ties, but I've got full faith. And I think for me, we've earned the right to believe that we're in this title race. We've worked hard. We've grinded some very good results. When the chips have been down, we've stood up and been counted. So we'll see where it takes us. But I think for me, it was just good to see the players having each other's back, in particular with that moment where I think if we look at prior seasons, I've seen a number of players just step away from the action where everyone was together in that moment.
I know it was good to see, and it's a point that I'd actually forgotten about, Mark. So I appreciate you bringing it up, because I was exactly the same. It was great just to see them in people's faces, and then the number of orange shirts that came in and joined in. Because you're right, there were times where we've probably been too nice from in those positions and don't want to get involved in it. Where Nico is definitely putting himself in there, and again, we've spoken about captains and leadership on this podcast before, and it's always going to be a topic. But Tav, in all likelihood, is going to leave the club at the end of the season. Who do we want as captain for next year? And if Nico continues the form that he's got, and we can keep a hold of him, especially if he has a good World Cup with Belgium, then to me he seems to be the no-brainer in the group at the moment, to give the armband to. And it will help protect him on the pitch a little bit as well, because he is the one that is in the referee's face, is questioning things, and certainly being a bit of a pest when it comes to that sort of stuff. And that's what you need. You need somebody that's going to be like that in the middle of the pitch, because the rest of the players will take a lift for that as well. So I think it would be interesting to see who's going to get that armband next year. And I think Nico will definitely be one of the contenders if he's still here. And we don't sell him in the summer, just like CGM said.
I think he'll be sold in the summer. I think he'll have a good World Cup, and I'll be gutted, because you've got to be mindful as well. Was it 2 years left on his contract? You're in that danger zone, aren't you? Where obviously still peak value, etc. I think he'll have a good World Cup. I think teams will come calling. If it doesn't happen, that's a big if. Then I think, to your point there, then we should work around Raskin. For me, I think he's influential in terms of he's busy in terms of moments like today, as I mentioned. I think you're right there, where he's in the referee's face. I love that. I think for me, sometimes we have been too nice, and I think even before, when I mentioned about moments happening on the pitch, and maybe one or two, Raskin was always the one where, and then there's maybe about 5, 6, 7 other players that's nowhere to be seen, where it's a bit different. But I'd love Raskin to be captain. I just don't see it. I think for me, he will have a really good World Cup, and from there, he'll go into, maybe the Premier League or wherever it may be. But if he doesn't, we'll see what happens. But I just, from my perspective, I think we'll struggle to keep him if there's a decent offer on the table.
Yeah, sadly, I think so as well. But we can but dream, Mark. We can but dream. I think the other thing that was really pleasing for me today about this performance was the fringe players, and I'm going to class Asgard as one of those players, because in a lot of our minds, I don't think he's he's a nailed on starter just now. But 2 goals off the bench for Miovski. He's on a really, really good run of form at the moment. I think Dougie and Davey are talking about him being the potential Kyle Lafferty of this title running, or maybe Big Velichka, as Stevie was saying. Ant-Man's come off the bench and got an assist. I think that should give him a bit of confidence. Asgard's got another assist, but almost kind of gets a black mark in his copybook today because he headbutted Nico Raskin in the aftermath of his goal celebration. How funny would that have been if he had to go off with concussion because he'd done that? But we've got a number of players that are chipping in, and we've said this before, but we seem to be hitting form just at the right time when it comes to this running now. Absolutely, it's only one game at a time. The biggest game for us is this Motherwell game coming up when we get back from our trip to Spain, which we'll talk about in a wee minute. But how are you feeling about the squad that we've got at the moment, and the contributions that some of those players are making just now?
I think you're right with Asgard. I think if we start 2 up top, Asgard doesn't start. I think I'll be clear on that. I like Ant-Man. I think Ant-Man's got something to give, and I don't know if it's just been, he's also had a couple of injuries. Started first game incredible, and I think he's got that in his locker. I think for me, I think he can add something. I really like him. I know he's been a bit of a hit or miss, but for me, it's kind of like he's kind of a confidence player, isn't he? But I think that today, in terms of having that involvement, good assist, hopefully do him the world of good. Who else did you say there?
Ant-Man and Asgard. Yeah.
Barron's another one. You've got Chukwani and Raskin in there. Barron up to his injury, was instrumental for us. I thought he was incredible throughout that time. And in this run-in, I think if there's going to be games where we're starting with Raskin and Chukwani, half an hour or whatever to go, chucking on Barron, giving us the fresh legs, I think the impact he has on games as well in terms of dictating the tempo of play, I think will be absolutely key. Miovski's coming in a bit of form at the right time. Him and Chermiti could be the 2 up top. I'd like to see that. I seen there was a comment earlier in terms of Hearts and Celtic maybe not playing 2 up top. I think if we do only start 1 up, I think it gives us a disadvantage because Chermiti for me on his own just doesn't have that impact. So I'd rather start with 2 and try and benefit Chermiti. But the likes of Ant-Man, Arsgaard, for me, Gassama starts on that left, has to start. And obviously Moore hopefully gets himself fit and is obviously back in that team. But probably another player who I haven't spoken about in great detail. But for me, I think Roman's coming back is going to be absolutely critical for us in this run-in. I know we've not got a clear stance on expectation when exactly he will return, but for me, I think if we can get him in for the Hearts Celtic game and from there, I think will be absolutely massive for us. No disrespect to Magoma. I think he's done all right when he's been here. I just think Romans, in terms of that presence, that attacking threat he has as well, is just going to be absolutely crucial for when he comes back. But I think for me, the difference is now we've got a squad and we're going to need it. Even Skov Olsen, I know he's not hit the heights that we were expecting, but if he has 1 or 2 moments of brilliance, that could be the difference for us. But he's obviously just not delivered. But he's still a quality player. It's just for whatever reason it may be, it hasn't worked for him. But I think he could add something. We just haven't seen enough yet. But we know there's quality there. It's just a matter of if he delivers within the last 5 games. But again, I put him in the contention of that bucket of, could have an influence and coming off the bench and having a moment of brilliance. The positive thing for me is we've got options all over that pitch. Even Max Aarons today, I've not been a big fan of him. I thought he'd done all right today when he came on. I thought he'd done all right. But, we're going to need everyone to play a part, especially if Magoma, Tav, and then obviously Sterling, see where obviously he's at, but understandably why he wouldn't play today given the pitch. But he'll be obviously crucial as well coming back into the team. But there's options there. I think that's an important thing. We've got options across all areas of the pitch.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's displeasing from my point of view as well, mate, to be honest. That is the fact that you look at it now, midfield, you've got Dio and Barron who can quite easily come in for Chukwani or a Raskin. You've got Ant-Man, who's a suitable deputy on one of the wings for the likes like Osama and Moore. We've got options, which is great. It's not like we've got a starting 11 and then everybody else is not worth it. Chamiti starts up top today, gets two, is joined by Miovski, who then gets two. As much as we've criticised them all season, Asgard has a goal and assist and is actually contributing some numbers, which is really good. Raskin's beginning to hit form, and it just seems like the load is being spread across the team. The only position that I'm worried about is we get an injury to Manny or Giga, because ultimately we know who the replacement is that's going to come in there. But at the end of the day, we can't control that, and I think it's the other thing that I really like about the mentality and what the manager and the players have been saying. They are only really focused on this next game. They're not looking any further ahead than that next game at this moment in time, and it's the right attitude to take, because the next game that we play is going to be the biggest. And you look too far ahead. I think sometimes that's when you can trip yourself up a wee bit. The great thing is we're going to have a bit of time. And I'll ask you the question whether this is a good or a bad thing. Then we obviously don't have a game coming up this weekend. Team are going to go away to Spain for a bit of a break. Now I know we've not had great experiences of this in the past, but it gives us an opportunity to get players fit back in the team. Also gives them time together to really focus on what's required for the next 5 games of the season to get us over the line for that title. Do you think that it's a good idea, or do you think we should be focusing and staying at home rather than going abroad?
I think the issue you've got is, if we go back to the last few seasons with Gerrard and the hangover and impact that had was not great. I think it's going to be slightly different. I think for me, I think it's a positive thing. I think the team being together. How many days? 5-6 days or something? We're going away for a week.
5 days, I think he said. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, there's plenty of time. We've got a game, a couple of weeks. To say the Scottish Cup semi-finals is next weekend, and I don't mind it. I think it's a good thing. Team all together, different climate. We can work on things. We've not really had that, because any time that we've had a break over, it's been an international break, and we've been missed. A number of players have been away on international duty, so we've never had that collective group over a week, 2 week period where we've not had a game. So I think it's a good thing getting the team together for a bit of time. I don't mind it, and then you've still got about a week or so being back in the country. I think gives us that focus. We can do a bit of analysis. I think to your point, they're just having that understanding of what the next 5 games means to this club, and also the supporters. And then from there, see where it takes us. But I don't mind it. I think it's a good thing. Just on from a player's perspective, just having that camaraderie, just bonding over that time. I think it's a positive thing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I think will be interesting is it probably takes them away from distraction for a week. You're at home, you're trying to do the training. They're all humans. If they've got partners, they've got kids. There's potentially a wee bit of work that they've got to do away from the training pitch at that point. Getting them all together, getting a bit more of those bonds deeper, I think would be really good as well, because it is going to be a grind the next 5 games. We might be backs against the wall on some of them, and it is going to be down to who's willing to fight for their teammate a little bit more. I think the other thing, it will allow us to really focus on some of the formations and setup that we can use, I guess, going into some of these games as well. And I know the focus will probably just be on the Motherwell game, but at least it will give Danny and his staff a bit of time to work with the players, and hopefully get Scott Fry out on the pitch with them, working on some of the set pieces, so that we can get a few goals from them when we get back as well. So I think it's always going to be viewed as a negative thing if we come back and we get the bed against Motherwell. I think if we come back and we beat Motherwell, then people aren't going to be thinking that it's a bad thing that we've done. But I think the manager and his team have earned the trust of the fans to kind of know what's right, hopefully. And I think he's also mentioned that he's done something like this similar when he was part of the Bayern Munich staff. And I think it was when he mentioned when they'd won the Champions League. So if Bayern can do it and win a trophy of that magnitude, then hopefully Danny and Rangers can do it and come back fully fit, firing in all cylinders, and ready to deliver title number 56 back to Ibrox.
Absolutely, and I think another thing I thought was interesting was Danny had mentioned about the board that are going to be there as well. So there's going to be a number of talks, etc., while they're over there. So I don't know if they're planning, etc., obviously for the future. But I thought that was quite interesting that all parties are going to be involved. To your point there, if it works for Bayern Munich, then hopefully it works for us. But it's like anything, if we come to Motherwell, Motherwell come to Ibrox and it's a 0-0 draw or we get beat 1-0, then everyone will be having a hissy fit. But I don't see it. I think it's a good thing. I like the flow of it. And team, as you said, that distraction when you're home. And the fact that we're still going to be here for, 8-9 days anyway, in the build up. So there's plenty of time for that. But I think for me, that I always see it as a good thing, given there's that togetherness, and it's a restricted place where the boys are all together and also having some bonding sessions and having time to work on things as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a good wee segue because ultimately the thing we'll finish on is that trip, or the visit, sorry, I should say, of Motherwell to Ibrox, because that'll be the next game in the series of cup finals. I'm not going to ask what your predictions are until the end of the season. We'll just maybe focus on Motherwell a wee bit because I don't think they've been in the best run of form, but that doesn't really mean anything. It was a really tough game at Ibrox the last time we played them. 1-0. I hope to God it's not a 1-0 when we get back and we play them, because I genuinely don't think that my nerves would be able to take that, unless we score in the first minute and there's no danger for the other 89 minutes. We've obviously got a bit of a break between now and that game. Do you think that will help us regroup and come back re-energised? And what would you like to see, I guess, in the lead up to that fixture, and our approach to it? Because ultimately, that's the next big test, and we've really got to get Ibrox rocking for that game to make it difficult for Motherwell.
I'd wish for Romans to be back, but I don't think it will be the case. I think it'll be too early for him. That would be top of my list. But I think it will be good. Just that, you know what? I think given how important these 5 games are, I think the little break's probably not the worst. On the flip of that, though, it's kind of like, well, if you've got the momentum, you want game after game to come, don't you? You don't want that break. So you can look at it both sides. But for me, I don't see it as a bad thing. The only thing for me is with Motherwell, they're in a little bit of dip of form, but I think looking at the game on yesterday, I still think they're a decent team and they carry a threat. That's one thing about them. They've got a bit of pace up front, and they're very well organised, aren't they? So I don't think it'll be a straightforward, but I think just given how we've been in comparison to when we last played them, I think we're in a far better position than where we were then. And I think the fact is we're scoring a lot more goals. We've got a bit more threat all over the pitch. I'll be interested to see how Motherwell deal with that. But for me, I think when we come back, in terms of the point there, Moore as well, another one coming back and fully fit would be key. At least start with the 2 up top. Sterling also back in for Tav. McGowan will stay as is, and then team would be pretty similar over, and Asgard would come out, and Mjolski would start up top with Chamia. That's how I'd like to see it. And I said, revitalised and ready to go for these last 5 games. That's how I'd like to see us. 4-0, I'd bite a handle for it, but I think it'll be a tougher game than that. But I think we'll score goals. But Motherwell do carry a threat. But 3 points for Rangers. That's how I see it.
And that's all we can ask for, mate. That is all we can ask for. Well, Mark, it's always difficult when it's just the two of us chatting, but that was a really, really enjoyable one tonight, mate. Thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate it.
No, my pleasure, mate. I know I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. Lots to get through. Lots of things coming up. Lots of things going on. Never a dull one, but I appreciate it as always, mate.
Absolutely. Before I finish, I just need to say another massive thank you to all of the sponsors of Four Lads, Rhino Express, Clydeview Fire Protection and Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions, CSD Air Conditioning, Candid and RYDC, as well as our partners over at Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Stephen Kenny will be back with a flagship tomorrow night. All that is left for me to do now is to thank all of you for tuning in, watching live, or anybody that is watching or listening back again. We really appreciate the support that you show us, and hope you continue to share the pod online. Hopefully, when we come back on the Sunday show, we are talking about a convincing victory against Motherwell and 4 games to go to the league title. Take care.
The Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Clydeview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions Limited, and CSD Air Conditioning, in partnership with Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.